someone was struggling with that. Do you have any idea right now? Like last year, there were probably 3 to 4 names. Do you have a clue who you would vote for or you think you're going to vote for in 3 or 4 months?
It's such a tough year, right? Because you look at some of the top teams in the country and there aren't obvious contenders. And the other piece of it too is that a lot of sort of the top names and top returning players in college football are on teams with other of the top players in college football. So I think about somebody like Nick Singleton at Penn State, and it's like, well, okay, he's a great player. Is he going to split carries with Katron Allen? Is he going to lose touches to Drew Aller? Like, it's a really, really tough year. I think also about like Jeremiah Smith, who probably is the best player in college football in 2025. But by the way, Carnell Tate is potentially a first-round draft pick. They've got great receivers. Does Julian Sayin get the majority of the credit at quarterback? So this is as tough a year as I can remember to try to project who's going to win the Heisman Trophy. If I had to pick right now, and if I wanted to be a little bold about it, I'm really excited about what LSU has a chance to be this year. I might lean Garrett Nussmeier as my preseason pick, but one thing that I think really works against him is look at the last 2 LSU guys who won the Heisman Trophy. It was Jaden Daniels, who put together a fantastic statistical season, and it's Joe Burrow, who arguably had the greatest passing season for a quarterback in history. So that's kind of the bar to win it, I think, if you're at LSU. And even, by the way, if they go and win the SEC, that might not be enough to get it done.
Do you do the exercise of why do I even have to think about this now, or do you have to write about it?
Because I'm annoying as hell for asking the question is why.
Yeah.
No, I mean, well, first of all, yes, I do have to write about it. We will get asked about it. We'll have to put our picks on the record over at cbssports.com. But I love this stuff. Like, I love getting to talk about football and look forward a little bit. And, you know, I know that there's this conversation about, like, you know, all the preseason projection stuff and AP poll. Like, for me, I love it. This is college football conversation. This is what it's all about. And also, this is the moment where you get to have a little fun with it, right? Like, this is the last moment maybe that we get to think about LaNorris Sellers in South Carolina as a serious national Heisman contender. This might be some of the last moments that we get to think about, some of these other teams as potentially being in that conversation. So I love getting to kind of spread things out and have these conversations. And especially in a year where you don't just have an obvious guy or two rising to the top, it's even more reason to mention as many guys as we can.
So, Shehan, we were just talking to Adam Rittenberg, and he's like become anti-preseason poll because it kind of puts people in place. So I assume you're not that. You like the pre. I mean, I like it to a degree. I just don't like that it does sometime. I mean, I don't have a better alternative. I don't want to just like banish everything that I don't think is perfect. But do you have concerns that sometimes it can set the table and it takes an Arizona State an entire year to be able to gain the respect by the end, as opposed to had they started off closer to a poll at the very beginning?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that let's talk about Arizona State specifically, right? They were picked 16th in the Big 12 last year. It took them a very long time to get into the AP Top 25. But let's just say that there's no poll until midway through the season. Here's the reality. They were a 3-9 team heading into 2024. And on top of that, everybody wants to talk about the preseason rankings being a reason that they didn't get in. It's because they lost to Cincinnati in October. Like, that's why it took them so long to get into the poll. And I push back personally against the idea. And that, well, let me say this. Yes, there is no question that preseason polls can impact the way that people see teams. But I think it kind of works both directions. For example, this upcoming year, we've got a game, Alabama versus Florida State. 2 huge brands, 2 teams who have won national championships, been on that stage in the past 10 or 15 years. And so, like, if you're a casual fan, you're looking at that game and you're like, wow, that must be an incredible game. Alabama playing Florida State. Well, it's actually not a good game at all because Florida State is completely rebuilding and Alabama isn't Nick Saban's Alabama. Now compare that, for example, to a week 0 matchup, Kansas State versus Iowa State. 2 teams that will be in the top 15 or 20 who aren't necessarily brands that casual fans would think about as being nationally relevant. Well, because of the preseason rankings, people are going to notice, oh, that's number 14 versus number 17. This is a game that has huge national implications and huge Big 12 implications as well. Oh, I didn't realize that. I just saw these two brand names that I didn't really think much about and tossed it to the side. So I think that there's this idea that if we didn't have a preseason AP poll, then it would mean, oh, well, everybody would just come into the season being like, oh, let me see what happens. Let me think really deeply about all 136 FBS teams. When in reality, what would happen is that they just gravitate towards the same 8 teams or so whose logos that they recognize most. So I actually think that the preseason polls are really good and in many cases important. And all of this said, I don't want to spoil a piece that I'm working on for later this year too much.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
Okay. But look, when Tommy Castellanos goes 300, 150 on Alabama and they beat them
I was waiting for it.
in double overtime, and then later on they play again in the playoff, you'll eat those words, Jeyarajah. You will. You're right, though. I mean, like 4 years ago when they scheduled that game, everybody's like, oh, hot damn. Like, there we go. And then it just doesn't. I think, though, a lot of that goes into you've got to bake into the rules of the selection committee that if you say a team was like they were number 5 in the country when this team that we're considering going to the playoff beat them, they're like, are they number 5 now? Then that number 5 didn't matter. Well, they have to bake that in.
But that is 100% what the committee does. They reevaluate every single week. And on top, and I know that this is like talk. I've been in the mock selection committee twice, right? Like I see how they do their process, and they don't, for example, bake that in. One where I think, like, again, now I wish that they had treated this a little differently, but like a game that was right in my backyard that we've referred to all off season that ended up being huge was Baylor or BYU versus SMU, right? Like that was a huge college football game. And so whenever they update the rankings, whenever they put in new information, like they're looking at SMU and BYU schedules and seeing this was a match between a team that's rated this much, or this was a team that we had ranked here. You know, they are able to see it dynamically move in real time as they go week to week. So again, I think that there's also this idea that like the committee is thinking too much about what the rankings were in week 2. And I just don't really think that's the case. Their first rankings to actually select the playoffs doesn't come out till November. And I mean, again, like you think about some of the teams that come in and lose right away, you know, Michigan last year being another example of that. Like, I don't think that the committee was sitting there thinking, well, Michigan was ranked number 9 in the preseason poll, so we got to treat them as a really good team. They're going into November thinking, okay, well, now we have all of this information. So the reality is, again, this is an entertainment product. And I think that when I view the polls, like I don't view them because I don't think that it matters that much to the committee what's happening in the preseason and early season in terms of the rankings. What it actually is a way for us to gain context, both as casual fans, but also from a historical perspective. It's a big, like, for example, we have that game last year where Florida State, you know, they're ranked number. Sorry to keep ragging on Florida State, but to, you know, where they're ranked in the top 10 and they lose that early season game, right? So like that helps color a lot of different things. It's a historic victory for Boston College, and it's a historic victory for Georgia Tech. It's also context that tells us, hey, here's how Florida State was valued coming into the year. Because imagine if we didn't have any true historical context of what happened to Michigan or what happened to Florida State, or if we didn't have historical context of, man, Arizona State was expected to be really bad and they end up winning the league. Like that's important context, not just when you're evaluating this season, but also when you look back at history in 10 or 15 years.
Shehan, do you have a vote in the top 25?
I do not.
Okay. I was wondering, I don't either, and none of us do. But I was wondering if even if you feel the way you do or we do about not looking at perhaps the brand names of the logos or whatever, how hard would that be? Would it be more difficult? And are we not giving those who vote enough credit?
I absolutely think so. And, you know, a couple things I'll tell you, right? One, I was having a conversation with an AP poll voter the other day and, you know, somebody who covers the team specifically. And he was telling me, man, like, the thing about being an AP poll voter and covering a team full time is that on Saturdays, like I am mainly focused on an individual team. You know, when you're actually in a press box every single week and when you're actually on location, I mean, again, yeah, you're mostly catching up on box scores. It's kind of an impossible job in some ways for people who are so on the ground. Now, you know, my pitch would be, hey, you know, somebody like me who's watching every single game every week, I think I probably should have an AP vote, but that's a whole other conversation. But the other piece of it too is that especially at this moment, like everybody wants to complain about the AP voters not knowing enough about everybody. But like nobody does. Everybody thinks that there's like this magic inside information that like people should know or people should get. And like the reality is a lot of how these preseason rankings are put together is based off of projection, and everybody has different criteria for how they project teams. I've spoken about it on this program before. I really value things like returning production, quarterback play, returning coaches. There are other voters, for example, who might err towards the most talented rosters. You know, just in terms of being able to project forward, they'll lean on stuff like the SP Plus preseason analytical rankings or FEI. And these are all pretty legitimate ways to do this that sometimes work and sometimes don't work at all. So there's not really a science to how you should approach this. And so I think when people kind of look and say, to make a comparison, right? Like I put out the list of Big 12 coaches last week. Everybody thinks their guy is underrated, but ultimately somebody has to be on the list.
Yeah, you need to keep those, save the responses. Do any coaches contact you or the SIDs? Who is it?
Thankfully, I don't get much from the coaches or like the programs themselves too much. It's mostly the fans because, I mean, here's the reality, right?
Sure.
So, you know, whenever I put together the Big 12 rankings, you know, people, especially Oklahoma State fans, are not happy about it because I think Mike Gundy, and by the way, this is a vote of our entire staff. This isn't just me unilaterally doing this, but I believe Mike Gundy was 8th on the list, and they had a real issue with the big gap between Mike Gundy and Kyle Whittingham, who both are obviously coming off of struggling seasons. And here's the thing, right? Like, again, when you look at their resume as a whole, when you look at 20 years of data, like, yeah, I mean, I think that Mike Gundy is the most accomplished coach in the Big 12, including Kyle Whittingham and everybody else. But that's not really what you're judging in this moment. And that's sort of the big thing with all these sorts of rankings. And people love rankings. I mean, obviously the numbers bear it out, but
Sure.
like criteria is such a big part of putting together any rankings, and everybody's criteria is going to be a little bit different.
Do you, like, when you do those things, I mean, part of it is people only read the headlines or they see the graphic and they're like, okay, these are the coaches. And look, if you were rating all time, there'd be a lot of guys who are doing really well right now who'd be at the bottom because they're young coaches. They have they're puppies compared to what Gundy and Whittingham are, who would be right at the top. But when you're talking about right now in this moment, who is dominating it, everybody has ebbs and flows in their careers. I think that's probably the thing you have to deal with most, because if you see Oklahoma State, and believe me, they're, I would say, the second most angry fan base when it comes to criticizing their team in the Big 12 after Utah. It's Utah and then them, and they just go. So, but Mike Gundy right now, he's probably the 8th best coach in the league, the way things are going.
No, and that's the thing, right? You have to weigh everything. And, you know, to have the conversation, right? I think I'm jumping on with some Oklahoma State radio folks tomorrow, so I'm sure I'll hear about this. But, you know, it's interesting, right? Because you look at Mike Gundy versus Kyle Whittingham. Yeah, you see two coaches coming off of disappointing seasons. And I think that when you think about it existentially, though, and in this moment, like, you're not asking who would you have wanted in 2015? It's also like, who's adjusted better to this new era? And I think that even though Utah obviously has had a very disappointing last 2 years, I think that the way that they've done their process and built their roster has still been kind of the right way to approach things. They've been derailed by injuries, especially at that quarterback position. The thing that's a big question mark to me, and the thing that I think that Mike Gundy can prove this year, is like, they're completely starting over this year. They've got 9 new assistant coaches. They've got like 70 new players on their roster. They have essentially 0 consistent returning production at this point. They lost 3 or 4 guys who are in the NFL now, and also 1 or 2 of their best other players in the transfer portal. Like, they are truly starting from zero right now. That's not where Utah is, just realistically, because they've built up over the course of multiple years. So I will say too, when it comes to other voters in our coach rankings, I do feel like there are some people who are a little too reactive, who just look at, maybe 1 or 2 years and kind of, move too far in one direction or the other. I like being a little bit more steady with it. I like trying to look a little more at the totality and not just trying to judge the now, but also to project ahead, because